think briefly to give a short introduction to each of you, I think Deepak is a graduate from IIM Ahmedabad and has been focused mostly on the financial services sector over the last decade and a half, and is currently like a partner at Westbridge Capital. Ankur is the principal at Fireside Ventures, a lot of experience at KPMG before he moved on to build brands today, and is working very closely with multiple brands to really scale them up to the next level. And we have Om from Cryscapital, who is a graduate from ISB and has really been transforming a lot of old age companies into the new era. And I think while we worked with him recently, I think it's going to be amazing to hear from you how you look at that transformation as well, Om. So to get started, I think first question, let me put it to Deepak. I think in terms of companies, you have looked at many companies like insurance companies which have gone from being very small to IPO. How have you looked at the brand building journey during that phases, when they are small versus when they start becoming an IPO-ish company? How have you seen that journey?
No, great question, Suneil. Maybe I'll pick a couple of examples. The couple of one company is say Star Health Insurance. We've been associated with company from 12 years when they were 100 crores in premium. This year they're a couple of $1 billion in premium. Right. And even today we own about half the company. We are promoters. We've been associated with the company since Series B days.
Understood.
I think the way some of these traditional companies have evolved, for example, Star in the last 10 years has been primarily focused on building distribution through agency network. So they have today about 600,000 agents, and all the initial years the focus was to hire a lot of agents, sell health insurance as a push product, and there was very little focus on standalone brand building per se. But clearly in the last few years that thought process is changing. Because even in rural, semi-urban, where Star Health is very strong and a lot of growth coming, customers want some validation, right? What are the reviews? What is the brand, right? How you acquire? So if you look at the business in the last 2-3 years, where 90+% business was coming from agents, now almost 10+% of the new business is coming directly through the organic route, which is it can be, customers reaching out Star and through call center or direct digital marketing, and that business is growing at almost more than 2-3x of the business growth, right? And we do see in the next 2-3 years that part of the business will grow to over 20%, right? And within this, there are several ways the company is working on building brand. One is, of course, through digital marketing, having your own call center. That's more standard way, creating content on YouTube. But even there's a lot of focus on building a brand at top level. Right? It can be through advertisements or how customers perceive it from the hospital's perspective. There's a lot of focus which wasn't there 3-4 years back, right? And that focus will only increase. And maybe one more example I'll speak again. This is a company we've been associated for 10+ years from young days, called Aptus Housing. They serve tier 3, tier 2 semi-informal income customers in semi-urban India. Where the typical customer is running a kirana store or a bakery or a small business in rural India. Right. That business is today a listed company, close to a couple of $1 billion in market cap. While this business doesn't require a lot of branding, there are field officers who go sell housing loan to a customer, right, who don't have access to formal banks. Even here today, customers are becoming very conscious where they go and they want an app for payments, they want to see they want as much of the process to be paperless, they want to see Google reviews, they want to check out, right? So even there's a lot of focus. We've built a big team focused on brand marketing, right? While it may not be a funnel to source the customers, still there is somewhere the rub-off effect, right? When you go to the ground, customer wants to check out a little bit on the brand. So even here the same thing, the focus on brand is increasing quite.
Understood. No, I think the one surprising thing was like a lot of large companies have been built without branding as well. So I think that was, while we are from a branding industry, it's great to see, that, but at some scale, once you reach it, then you start becoming a commoditized player in the industry, and that's when folks start looking at a brand as well to differentiate. I think moving on to Om, maybe I think continue in the traditional company sense, where are you seeing the transformation happen and what is triggering that change as well, like some of the traditional companies you're working together with, what's the trigger?
No, so I think transformation today is happening rapidly and across industries. And I mean, one of the most traditional industries that we are working on together is energy storage. So battery, inverter, automotive battery manufacturer. That's the last industry you would think about going digital.
Right.
But to the trigger question, basically when we actually went down to the brass tacks and tried to identify where will growth come from, you need to map out the customer buying journey. Right? If I am going into the market and looking for an inverter battery, how do I make that decision? And we actually dissected that. What we were surprised by is a good chunk of actually more than 50-60% of people actually go online and search for best inverter for me at my certain wattage. Right? So that then became the hook for us to figure out, hey, if 50% is actually happening here, this is something that I can't let go of. The unique problem statement that we are now toggling with is while the discovery and preference is being built online, conversion continues to happen offline.
Correct.
So how do I build brand online and then track the conversion or optimize conversion offline is the challenge that we are facing or also trying to solve for. There is no clean solution. There are a lot of hacks that you build. You sort of do A/B testing in real world. You turn on digital marketing. Some markets turn it off in others. See what's the kind of impact that you're getting. You try a lot of different things to push conversion further. There are call center based lead management systems that are directing the leads to certain dealers, and at a dealer level you're measuring conversion rates, right? And that actually becomes a hook for you to or a measure with which you identify partners you want to send these leads, because everyone in the offline world is not as savvy, not as equipped to manage this. It's a value proposition for them as well. At the end of the channel, you're digitizing them, you're getting additional business for them, you're doing GMB listings for them, they're going digital, etc. Right? So it's a journey. It's a bit of uncharted waters at the moment, but there is clear precedence, and through some of these early A/B tests that we are seeing, that there is an impact that flows in even in offline.
Do you see, like, even from a competitor perspective for this particular client, like, because there are already larger players, building the brand is a way to kind of jumpstart and do a higher growth in the market rate? Is that one of the drivers as well?
I mean, that's a given. If you have to build sustainable growth, if you want to extract a premium out of the market, brand building is the only way for you to be able to do that over a sustained period of time.
No, great, Om. No, thanks for sharing that. I think moving on to Ankur, I think we heard a little bit on how traditional companies are now doing brand building, and you work with a lot of companies who very early on start building in brand, right? So how do you see that journey, and where do you see them starting? We work with a lot of founders who have 100% of their focus on performance and not brand building. So how do you see that transition happening for young age companies?
I think for us, at the stage when we come in, obviously the product market fit is most likely established. What it fundamentally tells us is that the product is good, product is addressing a consumer need, and that consumer need is large enough. Now, what becomes important from that standpoint is the journey to say, how do you then translate the functional benefits, the proposition of the product into really the consumer not only asking for it, recommending it, and becoming ambassadors of the brand, right? So this debate of saying consumer insights are important, I think we've gone past that, of saying the core of it is to say, what is your consumer demanding? Have you identified those insights? Historically, a lot of and brand practitioners would agree. Historically, we've all gone into brand bonding exercise, right? Ads which are explosive, ads which are connecting with the consumer, when it's assumed that the consumer has already tried the product once. At the stage when we come in, it's very important to create the brand journey, putting yourself in the consumer's shoes, right? So the consumer from an intent to engage and then really connect with the brand, that journey has to be well thought through. And the moment you start breaking that down, you will realize that, for example, and I'll take you an example of one of the portfolio companies. I mean, well, also Kapiva happens to be one of our portfolio companies, we did mention about it. But Traya, right, which is in the hair care space. Now, historically, a lot of brands in the hair care space have been talking about saying why hair care is important, right? Address it through either some curative or some wellness products. What Traya discovered was that everybody is trying, as a consumer, trying to address the problem at a symptom level. And some of them are aware of root cause, but some of them are not aware of the root causes which are causing these hair care, right? And then when you marry these two, the symptoms and the root cause, the functional benefits of the products truly then start resonating with the consumers.
Sure.
So what did we do? We said, okay, from a triad standpoint, can you actually first create awareness about gut health being the reason, right? And the product solution starts with addressing the gut health problem, right? It's a regime. So you take 5-6 months, you don't overpromise to the consumer. So there are multiple aspects of first empathizing with the brand. I mean, we talk a lot about saying community is important, you need to connect with the consumer. I think it's too early to talk about it in the brand journey. It has to be thought through of saying, first, have you understood the consumer? Have you brought in the element of empathy in every communication? Before you get into brand bonding, have you got into the intent and the engagement side of it? I think once you think through of all of these, right, rather than jumping the gun, the mix of performance versus brand, it beautifully sets in. I mean, the digital channels today, and to Om's point, even the offline channels,
right.
I mean, they're beautifully set as ecosystem, and we've never shied away from saying that the time to build consumer brands is today, and it will be in the future, right? There is enough opportunities which can be created for building large enough brands. I think the thought process has to be more of taking or zooming out and saying, what are you really solving for? And once you really understand that, I think it's more about just executing it.
No, definitely. And Duyal, I think like the brand also needs to think through the storytelling and the customer experience as well, right? I think Deepak, maybe you can share a bit more about like how some of the finance companies are doing that, where I think the D2C brands obviously a lot of focus on the customer experience all through. How do you see that in the financial services?
In financial services, I think it's more about creating trust, right? Somebody who you believe, let's say you pick health insurance, for example, or term insurance. I think Policybazaar did a great job in building a trusted brand, right? For insurance, it's a go-to place for many people today. I think it's more about that. Say in lending business, they want to check out some of the simple reviews or some of the peer feedback. Or for example, in Star Health Insurance, there's a lot of ads just highlighting the way Star will process claims, because when you go to a hospital, you're usually stressed out.
Sure.
You don't want the customers can't engage so much with the insurance company, right? They want a seamless process, because on one side your family is getting treated or you yourself are getting treated. Right. So there's a lot of focus on creating trust and giving a seamless experience when they come for the product. That remains one of the key focus.
No, definitely. And are you seeing that also, the customer experience? We don't have a customer experience expert in most organizations. How do you see that translating where, someone else is driving the brands, someone else is driving the shipping products, and, it's very diversified. How are you all seeing it? Or maybe you want to go next.
No, I think that's one aspect that is often overlooked in a lot of organizations, because in addition to a lot of things, that's the feedback loop in the organization, right?
Sure.
What's working, what's not working, what are the unmet needs? It's the role of this customer experience function within the organization to sort of be that channel back, feeding it back into the brand, feeding it back into the innovation, feeding it back into the product teams. So that's something that gets lost as organizations scale as well. I think most organizations, when they're at a small scale, do that very well, and that's what differentiates the better performing smaller brands than the others. But as institutionalization kicks in, as more and more heft comes into an organization, that's the piece that gets lost very easily.
So the founders and the senior management is very hands-on, then it's still there and then it gets lost. Are you seeing that some real good success stories in your fund too, which you're mentioning, Ankur? Do you see some of the new age brands really crack this customer experience?
Yeah, I think I'll marry both the points of what Deepak and Om were talking about, and I'll give you a couple of examples from the portfolio, right? I mean, Gynoveda, which is solving for women's reproductive and menstrual health. What are they fundamentally solving for? They are saying today's solutions available in the market, and it's quite an interesting one, right? Somebody with a PCOS, PCOD goes to a gynac, and the gynac recommends a birth control pill. But the reality is the woman is actually going when she's trying to conceive and she's realizing that there is a PCOS, PCOD issue. The solution is solving for a problem, but the second layer of the problem actually never gets solved. You're taking birth control pills while you're trying to conceive with so many side effects, right? Yeah. They came up with products which natural, committing to the point that PCOS can be reversed. Now that was a big bold statement, right? you had to first create awareness about it. You had to first build trust in the consumer's mind. Right. And check their community out on Facebook called the Circle of Sisterhood. The power of community really builds trust, right? I mean, there are almost 200 videos of consumers who were told time and again for years by the Ganax saying, you will never be able to conceive. This is not a solvable problem. They discovered Gynoveda, they gave it a shot. I mean, these are consumers who've been sick and tired of solving this, really wanting to be mothers. They took that journey, conceived, delivered in the hospital, and almost at that instant shot that video and posted it on that community. Now, that's the power of the community. I mean, somebody who's looking for a solution, when comes across that video, she is able to relate to it. I mean, she is able to, I mean, that trust, and you'll be very surprised when somebody posts this video, the person gets hundreds of DMs. The biggest common question being asked is, are you an influencer? I don't believe this. This cannot be true. So the trust building, it's also not so easy. Even with that powerful messaging, it becomes a challenge. I think the second point which Om was alluding to on the experience side, right? I mean, I'll give you another example since you
yes.
literally nudged me to speak about the Fund 2 companies, right? We've got a company called the Baker's Dozen. Now, what is the company trying to do? The company is saying, you have consumed bakery all your life in a very standard way, right? Can bakery products be consumed in a very artisanal way, right? And that's almost like a category creation. But till the time, and right from product, packaging, in your communication, the way the product is supposed to be consumed, the shelf life of the product, because why artisanal products are typically consumed in cafes and not as FMCG, they solve for all of that. And then the entire experience of consuming a baker's dozen bread almost on a daily basis with an artisanal touch, that has to be so consistent almost on a daily basis. It's not very cut and dry of saying, experience can be, experience is important. We all know it's important, but really the execution of getting it right on a daily basis, on a consumer's plate, in the consumer's wallet, it's a daunting task. And I think the digital channels allow you to do that. Sure. And that's where digital first brands is what we believe in.
No, definitely, Ankur. I think very interesting insights on how brands are looking at customer experience and building the brands. As investors, you all have a very strategic view of the board and what are the key initiatives. Where do you all see in the execution the biggest mistakes or fallacies? Especially since you all are outside and less emotionally connected to some of the initiatives that might have started and not working. So where do you see some of the big mistakes happening in the execution side on the brand building journey?
Yeah, again, I'll probably pick some of our traditional companies. I guess one of the points Amive was mentioning earlier, right? A lot of these organizations have a culture which is very traditional, right? People come from a very different mindset, right? If you want to really focus on some of these new age initiatives, right? You need a very different, younger, passionate people. Also, they come with different compensation, different incentive structures, like maybe more ESOPs. I think one thing we try to do in some of these companies is actually have a very different office, like a different building, right? And also hire some of these new age folks from the startups. Otherwise, for them, getting a person from, say, some of the new age tech companies like Swiggy, Flipkart, and putting them in a traditional office, it's usually a mess, right? The bureaucracy is so high. If you want to hire, you need 10 approvals. You can't pay those salaries, and some of these decisions need to be made quickly. So I think the way, at least some of the places it's working, is run them as an independent unit with their own P&L, own responsibility, and give that startup mindset, right? And report directly to the MD, to the board. I think that's one model is working. You try to integrate with the existing culture, existing organization. A lot of times there's a big friction.
Right, understood. No, I think we also think, last week also we met like a promoter of a large group. I think for them it's like brand building plus like a large organizational change and transformation journey, and I think right from how the conference room looks and feels of an old age company versus a new age is very different, right? Like Capiva's office versus a traditional company, you can feel the energy being different within this. Om, how do you see the biggest mistakes?
Yeah, so for traditional organizations, I see like 3 or 4 key friction points, right? Starting right from the top, I think embarking on a digital journey, first of all, requires conviction at the top.
Sure.
Because for traditional organizations, it's a bit of learning along the way. There will be hits and misses. So if the top management promoters are not bought into it, the exit button or escape button is hit fairly quickly, and there are premature terminations of such efforts, right? So having conviction at the top is number one.
Sure.
I think in addition to that, once there is conviction, it's then equally important to articulate very clearly what's the objective that we're trying to drive through digital, right? Is it brand awareness? Is it building consideration? Is it driving sales, etc.? Right? Because a lot of times you will get promoters who will be like, "Haan, digital karna hai." But what does that mean? What do you want to achieve out of it? Having that articulated very clearly and then deploying resources across those various objectives and measuring success against those objectives becomes extremely important. And then I think Deepak touched upon the point on talent as well. It is a genuine concern to get new age talent into traditional organizations. B, giving them the amount of space that they require with the degrees of freedom and experimentation that this requires. And in the absence of that, what a lot of times organizations do is then they look at external partnerships to solve for it. That never works. You require internal center of excellence because no one will understand your business as well as you do and the objectives that you're trying to drive and the complexities of it. So you can't execute it without having that capability in-house and then build on it through external partners.
Understood. Like what you're seeing in one of the companies. No, definitely. And Ankur, biggest mistakes companies are making today?
Yeah, I think if you reflect back, it's a journey, right? And it's very important to identify when do you switch and what switch do you make, right? To give you some specific examples without quoting companies' names, I think one very important part of the journey is initially you don't want to run some functions in-house.
Right.
There is a lot of dependence around on the fact that the ecosystem players, functional expertise on areas like supply chain, on areas like logistics and packaging, etc., is outsourced to a very large degree. It's important for organization leaders, at least, or the founders, to make that right call to say, when do I switch and get this expertise in-house? That's one. I think the second very important point, completely agree with both of them. Across the organization, it has to be one common belief that this can be successful. The journey is not easy. I mean, the growth is very amoebic to start with, and it's very important then for the founders to see through when is there a need to bring method to practice.
Sure.
I think that's where a lot of founders at times do find it challenging. So identifying the right, I mean, it's all about timing as we say, right? So identify the moment at which and what you need to really bring method to madness. And very simple examples, right? I mean, I was talking about the baker's dozen. I mean, it is all translating this daily product into FMCG, which means packaging becomes so important. Supply chain it has to be absolutely agile. While these are important aspects which will resonate eventually also in the brand building side, but the entire org on sales and ops has to run so seamlessly. And you don't have to create, fancy ERP systems to run it. It's all about maintaining the right communication, ensuring everybody is working towards that common goal, which translates into traditional KRAs not necessarily working for startups, right? I mean, 10 years down the line it may, but at the start, if you really try to impose those KRAs onto people when the organization is not supposed to be functioning it's not great for the company. So.
No, interesting. I think when we had met like 6 to 9 months back as well, I think you were mentioning how you'll have separate KPIs for like, some of these investments as well, like brand investments or innovations. How do you, decide to allocate those budgets for this new initiative?
Yeah, I think for any consumer brand, NPD, and Ami will touch upon it, product innovation absolutely is critical. I think it's almost table stake, right? So sooner you've identified and set your NPD engine in place, right? Because we are saying so much is vested on consumer insights. Now you've identified a need, and I can tell you examples. I mean, I was talking to you about Kainowid earlier. You have addressed PCOS issue, but you've not addressed facial hair. You've not addressed, obesity as a solution. The consumers are coming back and saying, hey, can you launch some wellness products? I mean, if so many consumers are demanding for it, and you've got the NPD engine which is agile to react to some of those insights, then, I mean, you've almost, created NPD engine on back of consumers. I mean, they're almost funding your innovation cycles, right? And in today's era, when consumers like you and me are becoming so particular about the functional benefits of the product, what they seek for, it's not about what I just put in my comms. They actually go to the next layer and they can see through it, right? They actually demand these products being as efficacious. Innovation has to be at the core of anything and everything that the consumer brands do. And we invest a lot, be it in terms of KPI, be it in terms of ownership, be it in terms of really the time commitment of founders. I mean, our suggestion as sounding board at the board level is about saying, don't stop innovating, right? I mean, that's absolutely critical. Online, offline, I mean, these are very, very complex channels to run, manage and scale. What an online is being successful, translating that into offline, there has to be some change, right? It cannot be one size fits all. So there are a lot of nuances to the thought process on saying why innovation becomes important.
Sure. And Om and Deepak, do you all see in traditional companies as well in terms of setting aside budgets for some of these innovations, even digital initiatives? Is there resistance or there's a lot of openness now? Deepak, maybe you want
Yeah,
to
sure. No, there's a lot of openness. Of course, as Om rightly mentioned, there's a way to measure it, what are the basic LTV to CAC, what are the few KPIs. It has to be done in a orderly manner, right? Not just giving some budget and go out and spend in Google. That's not the way. But yeah, all the firms at least we are associated with, there's a lot of push from board level, management side to invest. It's okay to make some mistakes. It's not going to be a linear path. But yeah, in a measured fashion.
Understood. Om?
Yeah, very similar to what Deepak said. I think there is openness. Degrees of openness may still vary basis individual personalities, of course. But from where it was a couple of years ago, there's a lot more openness to try this out. The smarter ones allocate budgets and phases.
Right.
You don't want to go whole hog and basically try out something, build a proof of concept, and then scale against those objectives. But yes, a lot more open now than say 2-3 years back.
Oh, very nice. So maybe we'll open up to questions in the interest of time, and then we can have closing remarks. So any questions? I think we had a lot. I have a lot of questions, but I think it'll be good to open it up for a bit.
Yeah, I'm Krishnan. I founded a brand called Bumperi, which is a reusable cloth diaper company. When we were pitching to angels, to money raise, we had a D2C burn approach, and the runway was limited, and then the capital got burned out. In a reusable diaper, what actually happens is, when you buy 6 to 8 diapers, it's like the mother is out from that particular category, and loyalty doesn't, and the continuous customer acquisition challenge is, that's a big challenge. So right now, I'm just trying to figure out the, again, hit back at the investor community with the D2C plan, or, go a little bit hybrid. It's a bit of a challenging situation to rebound to the investor community and then, hit back.
Sorry, is your question more on D2C versus omni-channel? Is that
Switching that Ankur mentioned, right? The switching to omni-channel, or go back, hit hard at the D2C.
So Ankur, do you want to take that? When do you see brands shifting from being only online versus omni-channel? Should that be your journey from the start?
I mean, I think 2 years back, you would ask me this question, I would have said, omni-channel possibly once a company hits a certain number, which could be 15-20 crores a month. I think my answer is there are some categories which from start almost have to think of omni-channel. Because, I mean, digital first channels, while it's very easy to talk about consumers moving towards it, if you really see both not the first trial but also repeat purchase behavior for consumers, be it in terms of pantry loading or pantry top-up, it has to be a play of saying wherever the consumer is available, I am available. And a lot of trials actually are getting infused. I mean, we have companies in our portfolio which are going omni, not even going to 5 crores a month. I mean, that was
any examples you want to share? Or?
I mean, I would refrain from giving examples and names per se,
Yeah.
but I think there are a lot of in the food space, in the BPC space, where, I mean, talk about color cosmetics, you can't build a digital first brand on a color cosmetics. I mean, look at sugar, for example, right? So there are many examples even in the ecosystem to say that if you believe that the consumer whom you are targeting is still wanting to have a look and feel at the product and is largely shopping offline while discovering the brands online, the time is now. I mean, there is no right or wrong answer to say why you should not do an omni today versus tomorrow, but there is absolute need for you to start discovering those channels, getting yourself placed on those channels, and and really understanding whether the consumer is resonating with your product, use case and the brand in those channels. It has to be a journey from an experiment standpoint, but if you do discover and that's working for you, why not? I mean, digital first brand doesn't necessarily mean that you only do D2C. There are categories. I mean, F&B today or D2C is, I mean, how many of us go to a D2C brand from an F&B standpoint? We go to marketplaces, we go to offline channels. So there are some categories where, I mean, fashion, lifestyle, home, there are categories which will always have an omni-channel play. Now the change is it's the way the consumers have started to behave. It's already started to play sooner in the journey of a brand as compared to what it was possibly 2 years back. Also because the ecosystem is ready for it.
I think given our Bangalore traffic, we have time for just one question. Yes, please.
I think Deepak, you were mentioning more about insurance and financial products to be sold on D2C. What we've experienced so far is while customer acquisition, though we have everything available online, there is still agency channel that plays a very vital role. We call it phygital, where there is a face to closing that particular client. Though servicing renewals can happen D2C, but we're still facing a lot of challenges on the acquisition side. So do you think financial products per se, there will be a time where the user will be completely comfortable to have an end-to-end journey online, or will it continue for say coming 5-6 years still on the phygital or a mix kind of omni-channel kind of acquisitions on customers?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. See, even if you see, for example, let's pick insurance, right? Health insurance. Even today, globally and even in Asia, largest channel of acquisition is through agency because the product is very complicated. You try to read a health insurance policy, there are so many conditions, so many terms, most of us don't understand. And also there's a perception that when it's being used, also there are a lot of complications right in the hospital, so they need some assistance. Having said that, if you just look at the digital sales in health insurance, maybe 5 years back they are less than 5%. Today they are almost 20-25% for the industry in the current year, right? So it's a growing trend, and all the companies, not just in our portfolio, companies across the portfolio, the digital is the fastest growing channel, right? So yes, gradually people are getting comfortable. Even in these policies, right, which are so-called digital, there is a lot of assistance. You can go to Policy Bazaar or you can go to our companies. An average call center person spends few hours before the customer buys the policy, but still a lot of leads coming organically through brand, and even the perception that there should be a lot of help at servicing, even that's getting addressed through the broader brand building. In fact, that's one of the big objectives. Yes, agency will remain an important channel, it's not going to go away, but the share of digital has been continuously increasing.
Yeah, just one addition to that, do you also think ticket size would have a huge impact on that in terms of premium ticket size?
In what context? Sorry, are you saying?
So if the ticket size is high, would the person prefer going offline, ticket size is low? Is that a right hypothesis or assumption?
Not really, at least the data we see for the industry, the ticket sizes maybe in digital channel are slightly higher, but not too different. But the good part is you avoid a lot of frauds, you avoid a lot of mis-selling, so the profitability and the claims experience is much better.
No, thank you. Honestly, the three gentlemen have been so insightful. I'd love to continue the conversation, but I really appreciate you all taking out the time for this. And I think your insights definitely help us understand from like a board level as well, how do you all look at brand building and innovation as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
yes, a round of applause. Yes.